the Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. As I indicated in my second reading speech, I think we can all agree that the intent of this bill is admirable, excellent. The thrust of my second reading speech was actually that the cause of all this devastation has not yet been addressed, and specifically the alcohol consumption. Now, as I understand it, there are fairly strict criteria for those serving behind the bar at how they determine whether someone is capable of taking further alcohol. Am I correct in that?
Minister.
Thank you. You are correct. There is responsible service of alcohol training and like a test that people who work in licensed premises have to have gone through that course.
The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
That's admirable, and as it should be. But my experience, my limited experience, is that there are several manifestations of alcohol intoxication. One, of course, is your silent drunk who sits there quietly, smiling vacuously, maybe breaking into song. The other is the one who becomes the obstreperous drunk, the one who would become aggressive. It's simply a factor of alcohol being a depressant of the central nervous system. And those are two very different categories of people. The problem with that is that when the aggressive person has I better preface this. When I'm normally speaking to my patients, I'm saying, listen, the main problem comes after the second beer. It's by the third beer that problems occur. And that's the time at which the central nervous system depression does take place. Our inhibitory mechanisms begin to fail, and that's when our personality begins to shine through. Now, the person who is by normal nature aggressive, unconstrained, would by the third beer become a bit difficult to handle. I could imagine, not having been in the situation, that refusing alcohol to someone at the third beer or the fourth beer can be a problem when the aggression begins to rise. Is there any support, or is there any way that those behind the bar have some security in feeling safe at refusing alcohol to those who are not blind drunk, but are plainly going to become aggressive by the next drink?
Minister.
Thank you. So as I indicated, the responsible service of alcohol course provides those who work in licensed premises with the tools or with the things to say in dealing with people who are under the effects of alcohol. It's also...
I've done that as a bar manager's course, and it is an extensive course. I'm still a registered bar manager.
I've still got my responsible service of alcohol, whatever it's called, currency anyway, and in fact it happens. So we were down in Greenbushes last week having some dinner, and I watched a young bar woman point out to a person who was obviously inebriated that she was not going to serve him, and she was very clear and, you know, I wouldn't say brave, but she matter of factly, no, you're under the, you know, how much have you had to drink? No, I can't serve you any more alcohol. People do it, and people do it on a daily basis. And so that happens at the moment. Just back to your kind of earlier comment about a person who, you know, a quiet drunk, I think was what you said. That the exclusion orders can be sought when a person behaves in an unlawful, antisocial, disorderly, offensive, indecent and threatening way in a precinct. If there's a quiet drunk sitting in the room, they're not going to be affected by this. It's those who are actually acting up and causing offence and causing a risk to other people, because of course there is that, and the person being in the precinct could cause violence or public disorder or impact the safety of others. Someone sitting there quietly has had 4 beers. I couldn't imagine them being affected by this.
The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you, Minister. My feelings entirely. The quiet uncle who's sitting there smiling quietly is of no threat to anyone at all. The next problem I'm facing here is imagining the state of the police in Northbridge and other precincts when the often young males, but increasingly I think young females too, it seems to be a problem of the younger generation, fueled by the hormones and with a few drinks under the belt, then become difficult, maybe not drunk, but are working in a crowd, and then are working one against the other. So the person who becomes a problem is simply the spear, the point of the spear, the body of the spear behind him is that little group of people who are egging him on, her on. What do we have in the way in the bar before this becomes a problem? Are there any issues with the serving of alcohol responsibly to crowds of young people?
Not to crowds of young people.
Minister.
Thank you. So a licensee can refuse service of somebody if he thinks they're being quarrelsome. But I guess, you know, just because you're in a group of people, the person behind the bar is not going to say you can't have a drink. They need to ascertain whether they think the person has had a lot to drink, certainly, or it could be over the limit, or are showing signs of inebriation. But the bar person would normally do it one-on-one, but certainly a licensee could decide to exclude people. I just will make a further point, and that is that high-risk facilities, they can have conditions put on their licences that they need to provide security guards, and so that happens. And so certain places in Northbridge, and I dare say in some of these other proposed precincts, you will see security guards on the door, and that would be a requirement, most likely, of their licence.
The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you. Most clear. I do appreciate that. The problem I'm seeing, however, is that despite the best efforts of well-trained staff with security and, of course, with the police, there are going to be those people, those reprobate people, who are going to be doing their best to avoid the sensible measures being taken here, and there's no real recourse to that. The only problem being that there's the alcohol served legitimately and legally beforehand, which allows that situation to exist in the first place. So I'm not expecting any answer from here, just making the point that while the aims are entirely honourable and supported by all members of this House, I do suspect that the proof in the pudding is going to be how much can we improve access to families in these entertainment precincts as the result of this legislation.
The question is...